Hey everybody. This video is going to go over the PowerPoint in the week 3 module on identifying argument purpose, reading, thinking, and writing about issues. You're going to see, if you haven't already looked, that one of your homework assignments for this week is project part 1. So we're really starting to, begin the process of working towards that final essay that you're going to write for the course project, which is an argumentative research paper. So this PowerPoint is going to go through just some best practices for how to find your issue and make sure that it's one that will work for this type of assignment, and how to begin looking for sources and how to analyze those sources to make sure that they really will help you in your essay. So it's a super important set of slides to go through. So please make sure that you go through the slides in addition to watching this video, because it will help you quite a bit as you begin working on project part 1 and then moving through the rest of the course project. So the first thing that is important is to make sure that you truly understand the assignment you've been given and analyze it and then allocate some time for it. Those two are such big components of doing well, of succeeding with the course project. Is first making sure you understand exactly what's being asked of you, but then also to plan your time, because I know we're all so busy with, you guys are busy with your other classes, we're all busy with life. So finding time to work on this is crucial, and planning out what steps you're going to need to take and how much work is going to go into each component. So we have a sample assignment here, which is very similar to what you're being asked to do for the course project. The sample assignment is write a 5 to 6 page typed and double-spaced argument paper in which you identify an issue, take a position on the issue, make a claim, and support it so that it is convincing to an audience of your peers. Do as much reading as you need to do, but plan to draw material from 3 to 5 sources in writing your paper. Use APA style to document your sources and prepare your reference page. That really is pretty much what you're being asked to do for the course project. So let's analyze that assignment, okay? If you go to the next slide, and looking through how we're going to tackle it. This example here is only giving you 3 weeks to work on it, whereas we're working on it through the whole quarter, and yet it's broken up into parts for the project, but it is all culminating in that final essay, if you will. So in week 1, this person, wrote down all the things they wanted to accomplish in the first week once they started, working on the essay. So selecting a broad topic, drafting a research question, and writing down their initial ideas. They decided they're going to spend 2 hours on Tuesday working on that. Then they want to read some articles on the topic and write summaries and responses, which we'll talk about in a minute. They decided they were going to spend 3 hours doing that on Wednesday. Then we're going to take my own position and write my tentative outline or my list of ideas. I'm going to spend 2 hours on Thursday doing that. Then I'm going to explain my outline to a peer group in class. We obviously can't do that. Get ideas for improvement and write them down. But you are going to run your topic in your starting claim by me first, so you'll get my feedback. And then they're going to write a first draft, and they're going to spend 2 hours Saturday on that. I think that's being awfully optimistic of how long it will take to write the first draft. I think it would take a little more than 2 hours, but that's just me. Then in week 2, they're going to read the first draft to their peer group and gather ideas for improvement. Again, you're not doing it in a peer group. You're going to get my feedback. Then they're going to do some more thinking and writing. They're going to read more sources to fill in any gaps that were pointed out. They've allocated 2 hours on the following Wednesday of the second week to do that. Then they're going to write their second draft. They're going to spend 2 hours on Thursday, so they're going to make revisions and write the second draft. Again, I think that's still pretty optimistic. Then they're going to read the second draft to a peer group. You aren't doing a second draft, so that's doesn't quite apply here. But the idea is that you're seeing how they're planning out each step of the process and then figuring out when they're going to do it. And then in the third week, they're going to revise and prepare the final copy. So clearly, your analysis of your assignment isn't going to look exactly like this one. Because A, the time frame is longer, and B, there are certain things that you're doing that aren't represented in this sample analysis, and vice versa. The idea, though, is to think about what steps you need to take to get to the final product. I've broken it down into project parts for you, but you'll want to maybe do this when you look at project part 1 today. Look at it and think, okay, what do I need to do to accomplish everything that's being asked of me for project part 1? Now, when am I going to do it? When am I going to brainstorm free write for my topic? When am I going to think about sources that I want to use? Things like that. So understanding what is asked of you and figuring out when you're actually going to do it can help you so much, because once you start to fall behind, it's so much harder to get yourself back on track and do well on it at the same time, right? So just a little trick you might want to use as you begin working on the course project. So how do you start coming up with ideas? All right, so identify an issue that you're interested in, something that's debatable, something that you have a particular point of view about, and just, start there. Start broad, right? Think something debatable. It doesn't necessarily have to be controversial. It doesn't have to be polarizing. Like those big issues out there in our society. It could be something much smaller and much more localized, but still something that other people would disagree with you on. All right. Then use your pre-writing strategies to start narrowing that issue to something that is manageable in the amount of time and pages that you're being asked to write. Use the free writing, use the listing, the mapping, the outlining, right? I give you a sample cluster map on the next slide. So on slide 5, this person, this student, is thinking about an issue on, common learning problems for kids with learning disabilities. We don't really see how it's debatable yet, but that's not as important right now. If you have it in your head, you know that you're going to take it somewhere that's debatable and argumentative. That's fine. You just are trying to focus your attention at this point. So they have math, reading, spelling, and composition. Those are 4 big areas where students with learning disabilities tend to struggle. And then off of math, they have there's too much reading in math today. So that's going to affect kids with learning disabilities. It's hard to understand the special language of math. They have trouble remembering facts. They get frustrated easily. They don't really understand abstract concepts very easily. They may tell themselves they hate math. Really, it's just because they struggle with it. And then other problems in the other areas, like reading and writing, they show up in math as well. So then they looked, so reading is one category of problems that kids with learning disabilities have. So what all do I know about this particular category? What else has to do with reading? Well, they have trouble understanding the meaning of things they read, comprehension. There's embarrassment because they struggle with their reading. They have a slow reading speed. It's hard to learn sight words. Sight words are the ones that you can't really figure out phonetically. They have a limited vocabulary. They make slow progress. And so on and so forth. We've looked at pre-writing techniques in composition courses, and if you took my comp course, in particular, I know you've looked at pre-writing techniques, but the mapping can really help, especially if you are a visual learner. And then once you're all said and done, if you've been able to sort of keep track of your own thoughts throughout the process, you have a really awesome visual um, for how to focus your attention. Because, you can't do justice to this general topic, this broad topic of common learning problems for kids with learning disabilities. You can't do justice to that in 5 to 6 pages. So you need to focus in on a particular aspect of that issue. And now you have 4 to choose from. Do you want to focus on the math problems, the reading problems, the spelling problems, or the composition problems? Let's say we go with math, okay? We want to focus our attention in our essay on common problems in math that kids with learning disabilities experience. And then look at all those little tidbits coming off of the math section. Those are main points that you can choose from. Do you want to, there's too much reading, so the reading and writing problems turn up there too. It's hard to understand the special language, and they don't get abstract concepts easily. Those are 3 main points for your argument about how math is a problem area for kids with learning disabilities. Clustering and mapping is great to get you to that visual point where you can see where you're able to focus, and then main points that can come off of that area of focus. Okay, so you're not going to be turning that part into me for the course project. So do it however you want. You can do it more than once. So the first thing is identifying the broad issue and then using the pre-writing techniques to narrow the issue and get to a manageable topic for the essay. Then you want to test the issue. So on slide 6, you have a list of questions here, and it says, do you have an arguable issue? Well, can you answer yes to all of these questions? So is this an issue that has not been resolved or settled? Is it still something that's debatable? Does the issue potentially inspire 2 or more points of view? There has to be an opposing point of view in order for the topic to work for this particular type of essay. Are you willing to consider a position different from yours and perhaps even modify your views? You have to be willing to be open. So if you're thinking about working with a topic where you are just adamantly, sure of your position and you are not willing to entertain any other points of view, it might not be the right one to choose for this particular essay. Okay, you need to have a little more, choose an issue where you have a little more of an open mind. That doesn't mean that you're going to be wishy-washy and that you're going to change your point of view. It just means that it's an issue that you're not so emotionally attached to already that you're at least willing to talk about the opposition with a reasonable tone and an open mind. Are you sufficiently interested and engaged in the topic? Choose something that you want to write about. Do other people perceive it as an issue, or is this something that only you perceive as an issue? But even if you're the only one that perceives it as an issue right now, can you convince others that it is an issue that they need to be concerned about? Right? We're going to learn more about that later on in the quarter. Is it significant enough to be worth your time? Is it important enough that you should devote your essay to it? Is it a safe issue for you, or is it too risky or scary? Are you willing to go there? Sometimes, believe it or not, students pick issues, they pick topics that take them through emotional waves. And it seems like a good idea at the time, and then they get midway through and they're like, oh my gosh, this is too much. I don't need too much work, I need too much feeling, too much emotion. To make sure you're not treading down that road either. Can you establish common ground with your audience? Can you establish, in terms of the background or related values, especially with the opposition? Will you be able to get information to come up with convincing insights? Will there be research out there for you to use? You might, if you're wondering about that, if you're not sure, you might want to take some time to research the topic before you start working on project part one. Because project part one is asking you to part of it is asking you to come up with your topic. But you have to do research for it. So if you have something in mind and you're like, oh, I'm not sure if there's really going to be enough out there, go look first. Just see what's out there. You don't have to read any of it yet. Just make sure that there's stuff for you. And then you're like, okay, there'll be enough. I'm fine. And then move forward. If there's not anything, if you are really struggling, you might want to rethink the topic. Can you eventually get a clear and limited focus on the issue? Because we're starting broad. Are you sure? Are you certain that you can focus, you can narrow in on a specific aspect of that issue? And is it an enduring issue? Can you build perspective by linking it to an enduring issue? Is it something that is connected to other aspects of our life? And can you predict one or more audience outcomes? So think of like your classmates as the audience. Will they be convinced? Will they be hostile or neutral or attentive? Do you think that people will be affected by your argument in some way? If you can answer yes to these, then you're probably in good shape to move forward. But you want to make sure that you do have an arguable issue before you get too far into the process. Now, I'm going to be checking project part one, right? You have to get my feedback on it before you move forward to project part two. So if it turns out that you really don't have a good issue to work with, you're at least going to get my feedback at that point before we move forward with project part two. But even still, wouldn't it be better to know beforehand, before you do all that work on project part one, that you've got a good issue to work with? If you are really unsure, email me. Send me an email and say, this is what I'm thinking about. Do you think it's safe to go ahead and move forward on project part one? Right? There's no harm in trying to, get my, bounce your ideas off of me before you even start on project part one. I'm fine with that. Okay? But make sure you have an arguable issue. And then getting started on writing it, because you're going to have to choose your topic and narrow your topic for project part one. Start with writing down everything you know about your issue. One of the things you have to do for project part one is a free write, where you write for 8 to 10 minutes nonstop. This is kind of where we're starting here. Write down everything you know. Write it quickly, uncensored. Don't worry about anything. Anything you can think of, just any and everything. Start there. One of the next things you're going to want to do, not necessarily for project part one, but definitely for project part two, is you want to read to improve your own background information. These are not necessarily sources that you're going to use, that you're going to refer to in the actual essay. I'm talking about just initial readings, just to improve your own knowledge of the topic, right? It might turn out that something you read at this point is something you'll want to use in the essay, but not necessarily. This is just reading to make sure you understand your topic fully before you really get too far into the process. Use images, click and copy images on the computer and put them in a file. You never know what you might end up wanting to include in the essay. You can use some critical thinking prompts. They're there on slide 8 if you want to, like associating it, describing it, comparing it, analyzing it. Is it part of something bigger? Consider the issue over a period of time. Elaborate on it, predict. So those kinds of critical thinking prompts get you to really start thinking about your issue more. But I want to move on to the next step, which is reading to develop arguments. You're presenting your own argument, but along the way, you're going to be reading other people's arguments on your topic. And so you want to make sure that you understand what their purpose is in writing about your issue, right? You know what you want to do with it. What are they doing with it? And really being able to figure out what their overall purpose was. Is it an obvious argument? Is it obvious that they are arguing for one point of view or another? Is it an extremist argument? Extremist means, you know, exactly what it sounds like. So, I'm not saying that it's not allowed to use a source that provides an extremist argument on your topic, but you need to be clear that it is an extremist argument, and you need to clarify that with your reader as well when you're referring to that source. Right? You can think of certain, I'm going to use obvious examples here, certain political platforms, websites and news outlets and things like that, for instance, like Breitbart. Breitbart is a very extreme, conservative, right-wing media outlet. And there's nothing wrong with that. But you just need to make sure that your reader knows, if you're quoting something from a source like that, that it's coming from a source that is known to have extreme points of view. And extreme does not always mean bad, so please don't think that. It just means, they're clearly landing on one side of this issue, 100%. And we need to know that. We need to know that this information is coming from a source that, believes fully one way or the other. Is it a hidden argument? Are they trying to sneak it past us? Are they, is it smoke and mirrors and sleight of hand here? Is it an unconscious argument? Sometimes you have people who are providing what they honestly feel is objective writing, but sometimes obvious argument slips into it, right? Or is it an exploratory argument? Are they just, putting out all possibilities and exploring other, all points of view? Or is it objective? Is it like the way news reporting is supposed to be? They're just the facts, man. All right. Know what type of purpose your sources have, and then you're going to know how you can use them best, right? And to make sure that you are presenting information accurately and credibly. So more on reading to develop arguments. On slide 13, there is a photo, and we're trying to apply our knowledge of those 6 types of argument purpose. And it's a picture of President Obama before he was president, when he was still a senator, running for president. Looks like he's on the campaign trail, right? Shaking hands, all that sort of stuff. And it originally appeared in a newspaper as an objective report of then Senator Barack Obama campaigning for president. Can you detect any signs of hidden or unconscious argument in this picture, or any other type of argument? I don't know that extremists would be in here. Nothing appears too extreme. I would say, going back to that idea of hidden or unconscious argument, or maybe even obvious, I don't know. But I think, if you think about how he's positioned, how he's presented, how he's positioned in relationship to the crowd, what we notice about the crowd in the background, I think there's some interesting things that you could see where an argument is being made. It's not as objective as it first appears. If you think about the flag in the background, that's saying something. It looks like he is in a crowd of all white people, at least what we can see of the crowd. I don't imagine that that's on accident either. I think there's a possibility that they would show him in front of a crowd like this Certainly there were some Americans still at the time who doubted whether or not having a black president was good for the country. But these people seem to think it's just fine, right? So I think that there's something there with an argument that's being made. It could be an obvious argument, maybe, but it says it appears as an objective report. So there, if it's supposed to be objective, and yet these images are showing up, then it probably is either hidden or unconscious. They're trying to slide it in there to get us to absorb it without really bringing it to our attention. We're just gonna start to absorb the fact that, you know, he's very patriotic and he crosses racial lines, right? Or it could be unconscious. It could be that this person really intended to give an objective report, but their own points of view and their own values and their own beliefs and their own opinions about this man kind of seeped into the report and certainly into this picture, and why they perhaps chose this picture to run with the report, right? So the smallest things are there. Make sure you're taking it all in and you are looking at your sources with a critical eye. Don't just assume that everything is objective, that everything is as it seems, and that there aren't hidden layers to it. There's almost always hidden layers to it. And you need to know that if you're going to use these sources to back up your own claim, right? So more on reading to develop those arguments. You want to read your sources, read through all this information, and continue to think and continue to write. You know, jot down notes about your sources, anything they make you think about, or any questions you have about them, anything you're nervous about or leery about in terms of using a source. Make sure you survey and skim to save time. There's some steps here for surveying books, and then some steps for surveying articles and chapters of books, because I think that's one of the reasons why people are so adverse to writing research papers, is because not only is the writing time consuming, made even more time consuming because you're having to incorporate sources, but doing the research and just doing the research is time consuming. But looking at those two slides there, slides 15 and 16, on how to skim books and how to skim journal articles and chapters of books can save you a little bit of time, so that you're not wasting your time reading through things to try to figure out if they're going to work as a source for your essay, and then just finding out that it's not. There's nothing worth having in those sources. And it gets very frustrating, and then you just kind of give up. So learning how to survey and skim and having a clear vision of what you're looking for can really help you out in that process of finding sources. Read information in the introductions, you know, look at a couple body paragraphs, look at conclusions. You know, you don't have to read everything from the very first word to the very last word all the way through with a careful eye the first time, right? Get a sense for if that source is actually going to be useful to you. If it's not, toss it aside and don't waste any more time on it. If you think that it is going to provide useful information, then you set it aside in another pile and you come back to it later to read it more carefully. Look for the claims and the subclaims and the support that each argument uses. Read with an open mind, understand the keywords, look them up if you don't understand them. And then if it's a copy of something that is yours that you can do this to, you know, underline and annotate on the page. You know, underlining and annotate is making little notes to yourself on the page where the text is. And then one final thing you can do to really make sure you're understanding the source is to map or outline the source. We've talked about mapping and outlining our own thoughts as pre-writing techniques, but you can also use it to make sure you are reading your source correctly. So for instance, if you think back to week 1, we read an essay for homework called No Escape from Helicopter Parents. And I use it as an example here on slide 17 for how to outline an essay that you've read. So the first point of my outline is going to be the thesis statement, the claim. And the claim of that essay was helicopter parenting of kids in college is counterproductive. Then, what are the main points? The first subclaim is helicopter parenting has negative effects on both parents and their college-age kids. And then what support did they use for that subclaim? The second subclaim is this type of parenting causes undue emotional stress for parents. And then what kind of support did they use for that subclaim? The third subclaim, this type of parenting undermines the relationship between parents and their college-age kids. What support did they use for that subclaim? And then the conclusion kind of matches up with the claim, helicopter parenting is counterproductive. So I just took the concept of an outline and applied it to something I read. I looked for the claim, the main claim, and wrote that down. And then I looked for the first subclaim or the first main point, wrote that down, and then I summarized the kind of support that they used to back up that main point. Then I looked for the next one and summarized the support they used there. Then I looked for the next one and summarized the support they used there. And I could go on until I reached the conclusion. And then what was the concluding idea of the essay? You do that for your sources and you don't even need to go back to them. You can just make sure you have all of the information to do your reference entry. You have almost everything you need right there. You've almost like summarized the source by outlining it. You can do the same thing with clustering. If you go to the next slide, slide 18, it shows you an example of how to do mapping for something you've read. And it's the same idea. The main claim goes in the center, and then the offshoots are the main points, right? So having a visual for it can help as well to make sure you are understanding exactly what the source is putting out there to you. Make sure that you're taking notes so that you don't end up plagiarizing. Know that we're going to talk more about this later in the quarter. You should already know this, though, from Comp 2, that there's quoting, there's paraphrasing, and there's summarizing. Make sure you know what each one of those is and how to do each one. Always cite those, no matter which one you're using. So you want to keep track of your sources and where each bit of information came from. You need a good system for yourself so that you don't get confused because you'll put all of this away for a little while, right? And then you'll come back and start working on the project again. And then, so you don't want to even confuse yourself or lose track of something. Keep everything organized and keep your notes good. Make sure that you have all the information from any source you're going to use, but make sure, though, that you're only devoting your time and attention to those sources that you're actually thinking of using in the essay, okay? Use those skimming techniques to kind of sift through the potential sources so you know which ones you can already tell aren't going to be useful to you. And that way you can focus your attention on the ones that really could provide useful supporting information. Use those critical thinking skills and those note-taking skills to make sure you fully understand what your source is saying. Make sure you understand the purpose behind their argument. What type of argument are they presenting? And then use the reverse outlining and the reverse mapping to make sure you clearly understand the claim and the subclaims and the support. All right. Now, I'm not saying you have to be super focused doing every single one of these pieces of advice that are here in the PowerPoint, but if you can at least try to incorporate some of these practices along your way, it will make the process easier for you. All right. If you have any questions about this PowerPoint or any of the information provided in it, feel free to let me know and we will discuss it further. Otherwise, you guys are free to move on to the next item in the week 3 module.